Hey, everybody, welcome. We're going to let folks, log on here, get ready, get settled. We've got a really great event today. Turned out to be far more timely than we even understood when we connected on this a few weeks ago, given Frances Hagen and her courageous coming out this week. Really, truly inspiring human, one of my now true heroes. My wife, on her way to the office today, grabbed me and said, I just want to thank you for doing this event today. This is really important work that you're doing for our kids and the kids across the country. And so if I get that high praise from my wife, then everything else that happens today is easy. Let's see if we can get a few more people on, and then we try to start on time here at NDN. So let me get going, and just to as we always try to start on time. Welcome to one of our periodic conversations here, Zoom-based conversations we have here at NDN. I'm Zamaan Rosenberg from NDN. Many of you, I know many of the folks that are on today. And this event, for those who don't end up making it, will be recorded and will be able to be accessible starting this afternoon. This event was put together because I have a 21-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 16-year-old. My 16-year-old is my daughter, and I have two older boys. And I have, like many, I have had concerns about Facebook and Instagram for all the reasons that many have had concerns about, their effect on democracies and civil society, and creating more hate and outrage and antagonistic politics and all the things that we are worried about. But in a very personal way, what I've also been very worried about is the impact it's had on my kids and what I've seen with them and their friends, particularly young teenage women. And so after months of the Wall Street Journal slowly dripping out various reports from a whistleblower inside of Facebook, 2 weeks ago, the story broke in the Wall Street Journal about the impact of Instagram on teenage girls, where 1/3, in their own research, 1/3 of teenage girls in the United States who use Instagram have body image issues because of this. It was really time for me as a dad, right, and a guy who has a platform, to engage more aggressively, because it comported with what I had seen through the many teenagers that had bounced through my house over these years. And I was shocked at the scale of it. Perhaps, 1/3 is a big number when this is a universal platform, basically, for people this age. And that was really shocking to me. That there was data that suggested that number could be that high, right? As opposed to it being 5%, 10%, a smaller number. And so what's happened during the course after we announced this event 2 weeks ago, obviously everything has changed, and we changed the nature of the event a little bit to really make it a broader discussion about all the issues that Frances Hagen had put into the public sphere. And I'm really pleased to be joined by somebody who I've grown to really who I actually followed on Twitter and for a long time, and followed his work and followed the work of the organization he's connected with, the Real Facebook Oversight Board. Zamaan Qureshi is with us today, and if I mispronounce his name, he will correct me when he comes on. He's been a thought leader in this space about how do we make all this better. He's a young guy. He's only 19, 20 years old. He's still in college, but has become a recognized international leader in trying to find a better path forward. How do we keep social media, but make it better, right? How do we make this all healthier for all of us? And I do think the public health lens is going to be an increasingly important lens in the way that we think about social media. We have to view it as something that is making people unhealthy, right? In addition to weakening our democracies and all the other things that it does. And so Zamaan wrote a piece that was in Time magazine 2 weeks ago about the aspect of with a colleague of his, about the aspect of this discussion that involved what was happening with Gen Z and teenagers, right? And so I asked him to come on board. And since then, that article has gone viral. He was on Morning Joe this morning. I saw the clip. I put it up on Twitter a few minutes ago. He was great. And here we have a guy that a few weeks ago was just a college student who's now been turned into an important international leader in a really critical space that could determine the health and well-being of tens of millions of people in America and the health of our democracy itself. And so I'm really pleased he took the time to be with us today. This is a special event for me. He's also, because he goes to AU, he's probably only about half a mile away from my house right now, and we'll get together in person at some point. But Zamaan, welcome. And I want to just start by saying, what a whirlwind, right? For you. I mean, Morning Joe, all these media appearances, Frances Haugen, is more incredible, inspiring, persuasive than I think any of us could have ever imagined when we knew that it was a whistleblower. She's incredible, right? Her poise, her courage, her bravery, all these things. Where are we, right? You've been studying this stuff, writing about this stuff, talking about this stuff for years. Where are we today when it comes to Facebook and Instagram?
Well, thank you, Simon, for that introduction. That's quite a question to ask about where we are right now. As you said, Frances Haugen's testimony before the Senate Commerce Subcommittee has really shocked the world, I think. I think it confirmed what a lot of people knew. A lot of people were aware of the harms of Instagram and Facebook, but seeing these harms documented by Facebook, seeing these harms researched on and having data on, and then being given subsequently to the Wall Street Journal, to the Senate Commerce, to a Senate Commerce Subcommittee, and then the SEC, of course, as well, just shows how impactful the documents that Frances Haugen took with her are, and really speak to the harms of this company. We've seen time and time again lawmakers asking Facebook executives under oath and for the record for a variety of different documents, research, etc., answers to questions. This dates back to 2018 when Zuckerberg was in front of the committee for the Cambridge Analytica scandal. I mean, this company has misled, it's lied, it's evaded over and over and over. And on a range of issues now that we are actually seeing that they misled on, that there are documents and substantive and expansive documents that show things that they have misled committees over. I think I mean, as you said, for us, more importantly, the research on Instagram was striking. And for Facebook not only to kind of pre-run a story ahead of the Wall Street Journal last week when the Wall Street Journal released all of the documents that Frances Haugen had given to them with their own annotations, and then to say, oh, well, only about 1% of Instagram users have exhibited some kind of mental health issue. I think as Roger McNamee, who's a Real Facebook Oversight Board member, documented on Twitter, 1% of all Instagram users is about 30 million users. And so the harms we're talking about here are not small scale, a couple of people. It's a large portion of users. And I'm hoping that people are starting to wake up and see for themselves the damage and the harm that is being done by these platforms.
So, okay, a lot there. So what do we do now? I mean, what can we do? I know there's a lot of talk about regulation and government doing more, but frankly, this has been a tough area, right, for people to get their arms around about how to, what do you think? I mean, Frances, I thought, put a very important idea on the table, right, which is to sort of go back to social media 2014 and where it was chronological rather than algorithmic, using algorithms, right, whatever that word is that I couldn't get out. I mean, what are your thoughts about some of the ideas that are kicking around about what we can do now?
First things first, I think Congress needs to hear from teenagers. I think particularly teen girls. The stories that people have told me over these past few weeks, have told the Wall Street Journal. I think Congress needs to hear those stories. I think the American people need to hear those stories. because it shows that there are stories, faces, people associated with this data that Facebook is documenting. And then just on top of that, there are other basic regulatory things that can be done that I think we could all agree on. So for example, as I spoke about this morning, banning targeted ads for teens. I mean, you know, no young person should be bombarded with advertisements directed at them for certain products. The way that these algorithms are built to, you know, spend more time on the platform, it's a cycle. And as you said, as Francis Hagen talked about, Instagram's research documents and shows that teens who spend more time on this platform, even if they show symptoms of anxiety, depression, or have been diagnosed with eating disorders, are addicted to this platform and continue to stay because they are addicted and because there's a social price to leaving these platforms. We are so interconnected as teenagers on these platforms. We rely on them for a lot of our social interaction. So when we are thinking about regulation, when we are thinking about putting safeguards into place, I think we need to consider the fact that these aren't going away. As you said, these platforms are not going away. Teens are not going to leave all of these platforms all of a sudden. And with that in mind, approaching regulation from that perspective and not putting the onus on the company. The onus cannot be on Facebook or Mark Zuckerberg or Adam Mosseri, these heads of these big companies, to do something about it, because they've shown time and time again that no matter the safety, the detriments to the safety of its users or to privacy of its users, they will prioritize profits over that every single day.
Can you talk a little bit about one of the things you've been most proud of is the work that you did sort of exposing how much Facebook was tracking an average user, right? This is one of the first things I think you did that got you into this space, right? Can you, I think this is going to be a little bit shocking to people that may not understand how much these are surveillance platforms primarily, right? Almost exclusively to a certain degree. I mean, just the degree of surveillance that's possible. And can you walk us through a little bit of that?
Yeah. So in April of last year, there was a Facebook data breach that was brought to light originally by Business Insider. So essentially a rogue actor who was believed to be somewhere in the Middle East had been able to access the personal data of about over 500 million users. And so whoever the rogue actor was, the bad actor, made this data publicly available on the internet. And so at the time, working for the Real Facebook Oversight Board, this was something we were following closely. We had been in discussions with the Irish Data Protection Commission as well to ensure that Facebook was held accountable, and subsequently the Irish DPC also opened an investigation into Facebook around this matter. So I remember sort of, doing our work around this, writing the various policy information around this. And I had a lot of questions for myself. So first thing I did was look to see if I was a part of the data breach. I found my personal information that was in fact breached. That included my name, my email address, my home address, my employment status, stuff like that. Quite basic level of data, but certainly something that you wouldn't necessarily want floating all over the internet. And so I wanted to see kind of how much data was Facebook actually collecting on me, and how much was, I guess, available to be breached. I use Instagram a lot. I'm not much of a Facebook user. So I also wanted to see the interconnected nature of these apps and these platforms. And so I went, and I remember from the 2018 hearing, Zuckerberg told Congress that there's a download your information tool. And so I went into my Facebook account, I downloaded my data, and I found essentially like thousands of files of activity that I had been accessing off the Facebook platform. So Facebook knew, for example, that I activated the Domino's Pizza app or gone to Kamala Harris's campaign page when she was running at the time. It was a whole wide range of websites that the average user and even people who I think work in the industry wouldn't think twice that Facebook would have access to or know about that kind of data collection. And so I published this on Twitter, kind of in shock and wanting to give people some information. And as you said, it went completely viral. I think people were really shocked to see just how bad it was. And no one really knew. And I hope that what that gave people was an opportunity for them to go and see for themselves, to try and optimize their Facebook account to reduce that data collection. But I think it really, really shocked a lot of people.
And is that those practices are still continuing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Facebook continues to collect massive amounts of data on us. That's what feeds the algorithms. The algorithms are built on our activity, seemingly what we thought was only when we were using Facebook products, but the advertising side of things and the algorithm being built and curated to your preferences is also intaking information that you wouldn't even think that you're giving the platform. And the only way you would know that you were giving this data away to Facebook is either if you went through these tools like I did, or you read through the terms of service when you agreed to sign up for Facebook, which I know very few people who have ever read through the complete terms and conditions of Facebook.
Let me raise one more issue and then I'll open it up for our guests, is that, one of the, and now I'm going to vamp out loud here a little bit. This has been an issue, as people may know watching this, and we'll get to questions in just a minute, everybody, is that, I built the first ever countering disinformation operation in a major American political party committee in the 2018 cycle of the DCCC. And I worked very closely with Facebook and Twitter during that time and spent really a year and a half kind of deep into this world, working with a lot of the leading experts you see on TV and people, the University of Indiana and other places. I mean, I really spent a great deal of time understanding and learning about this. And we had a very sophisticated system that was able to do takedowns of foreign material at that time, right? In those days, we were still more worried about Russia and Iran and China. And the person who did that day-to-day work, by the way, is a guy named Tim Durrigan, who unfortunately isn't with us today, but he's now running the countering disinformation operation at the DNC and is a brilliant young guy. And we're, very, very lucky that he's stayed in the game here. He is probably among the most virulent anti-Facebookers on Twitter that I know, and he's a wonderful guy. And you need to meet him, by the way. I'll connect you guys, and you'll enjoy each other. But one of the things that became really apparent to me during that time is the sense of helplessness that everybody has about all this. It was amazing how much that sense of helplessness was actually instrumental, I think, in preventing Congress from doing anything, from creating any kind of conceptual framework for any of this, right? Zuck would come and do a shuck and jiving in front of Congress, and everybody would feel like they, rousted him for a couple of days. But long story short, I have, like many, and I've lived this because I was in this space in a deep combative way, right, for a year and a half. I never knew what it was going to take publicly to really cause this to change. And I think that this stuff with teenage girls is it, to me. And I speak because the reaction and response that I've gotten to these issues since I started promoting this event from just regular friends of mine who are not political people, being outraged and angry at Facebook, and just that it's possible that a company could have kept something of this enormity, because these kinds of eating disorders can affect, the way that young women grow. It can affect their maturation. I have a teenage daughter, right? So, I mean, it can affect their bodies for the rest of their lives. These are permanent scars potentially, and that can alter the trajectory of tens of millions of people. And what I think you and I talked about the other day is that what my hope is, and what I'd like everyone who's here who cares about this to start saying, is that it's time now for universities, for colleges, for high schools, for school boards, for youth sports academies, for youth sports programs, to, in their understanding of what they have to do to keep their students and their kids safe, they have to engage in this space now. There is no way to stay out of the game here. And we need to create a parent uprising all across the country where they are demanding that their schools conduct educational forums in the schools to help protect, give kids more tools, right? Because it's very hard for a parent to do this. Kids keep this stuff secret. This is their stuff. It's very hard to, as a parent, I've learned, to have sensible dialogue about these things. This is their stuff. It's not our stuff, right? Dad, you're on Facebook. You're old and stupid, right? I'm on Insta, and I'm on Snap, and I'm doing TikToking, and I'm cool, right? And so civil society has to rise up now, because we know definitively, without question, that Facebook is knowingly doing material and serious harm to tens of millions of our children right now, and they don't give a shit, right? And they're letting it happen, and this is not okay. And I think that for all the work that you've been doing, all the amazing work, and for many of us who came at this through democracy disinformation, right? That's sort of how many of us got into this, right? This is a dimension that is, I think, the thing that's going to cause the change. And even Blumenthal in the hearing yesterday, and I posted this on my Twitter feed, he read this, you sent it to me, actually, I got it from you, right? He said he read a text he had gotten from a Connecticut father that he knew, who talked about what had happened to his daughter when she started going on Instagram, and how she's now in treatment and had all these, body dysmorphia, all the stuff that happens, right? And it was, I was like, that's, I know dozens of dads that would feel this way. And I'll end with this one last just statement here, is that I have a former intern who is 22, who I was talking to about this yesterday. She said she thinks 75% of her girlfriends have eating disorders, have had eating disorders. And when you talk to young women, when you ask them how many of your friends, the number that I've gotten almost every time is over 50%, right? We're talking about something that is of enormous magnitude and may actually be the single biggest public health challenge facing young people in America, more than drugs and alcohol, more than vaping, more than drunk driving, it may be more pervasive and more damaging long-term than any of these other things that there's a national mobilization against. And so how schools and universities, sports programs can allow students to air out their addiction, right? To start letting it become okay that you're admitting it, and to create tools to get you through to the other side. This is going to be very hard for parents to do. It's just, I know this from living this over the last few years. And so I hope, you and I discussed this yesterday, and I hope that maybe even we can do something at American together where I can help. Maybe NDN can put up some money and fund it, frankly, for you, to create a model of like, what does a school like AU do to help empower all of you to fight this scourge, this public health scourge? Because they have programs on drug and alcohol abuse. They have programs on, when, sexual, when things happen between sexual matters between people. There's nothing on this, right? This is a non-existent community space. So what's your, just off the top of your head, what's your thought about all this?
Yeah, I have a few things on that. So first of all, you've made some really important points. I would say that one thing that I think parents can do, so any parents listening to this is for you. I think parents and teens need to have a conversation, and instead of punishing your teen for always being on these platforms, recognizing that these platforms are built in such a way to addict. And it's not that your kid is just angry at you as a parent and they don't want to get off these platforms. It's that by design, these platforms are sucking your kid in and keeping them on the platform for that extended period of time. And so I think once parents and kids kind of come to that collective realization together, then you can have a conversation about like, okay, what are some safeguards we can put in place so you are not always spending your time on these platforms, because these platforms are addictive and they are detrimental to the health of young people and teenagers, and especially teen girls. And the second thing I'll say is that I, like you, have had a range of stories sent to me over messages from friends, from people I've never met before. One person we did a little experiment with, kind of like Senator Blumenthal did on his fake Instagram account. We went in and liked a bunch of Instagram content that was promoting weight loss. And then we went to the explore page of Instagram to see what the algorithm was promoting on its own. And it was incredible. Within minutes, the algorithm was already promoting like really rigid diets, things about kind of weight loss, and even ads targeted at people around what kind of weight loss. And this person was registered as under 18 on Instagram. So Facebook, for all they say we take this stuff down, we never promote it towards young people. It's having an impact, and it's huge, the amount of content that some of these young girls are seeing, and the impact that it has. As you said, I mean, the comparisons have been made to big tobacco, and yes, the addictive nature of tobacco and the addictive nature of Instagram are not necessarily the same chemical addiction. But if we look at the addiction of Instagram and how that has festered across the world, really, I mean, some might say it's caused more problems than, say, big tobacco has. But this really is that kind of reckoning moment. And I think if parents and teenagers don't start demanding better, which we have to start demanding better, because these platforms really have, as Blumenthal said, as Frances Hagen said, have had detrimental impacts to teenagers, potentially for the rest of our lives.
I'm actually doing a call with the headmaster of my daughter's school this afternoon, and we're going to be talking about this and another matter. But I'm going to try it with my daughter's own school and see what happens, or high school. So let me open it up for questions now, folks. Two ways, as you all know, to engage in the conversation. I'm sorry we don't have this in a meeting format. We're in webinar, and so you can raise your hand and I can pull you into the conversation, or you can type a question. And we do have a question from Gil Ruiz. Hey, Gil, who holds big tech accountable for their high-risk data practices that cause real harms, like what is happening? Does the FTC have what it takes? What about an independent federal agency, like a data protection agency is established by Senator Gillibrand, for example, Data Protection Act? The FTC is regulating everything from laundry tags to Instagram. Is privacy an issue that is important enough to warrant its own agency?
So I think the Data Protection Act proposed by Kirsten Gillibrand might be a good step. I think it's yet to kind of fully take form in Congress yet. And I'm not really sure the long-term consequences of what that would look like. But I would say the FTC is deeply under-resourced and understaffed right now for the task that lies ahead of it. Ashkan Soltani has just gone to California's data protection. He was the former chief technologist at the FTC, and he testified in 2018 that there were, I think, 5 to 6 technologists who worked at the FTC who have to hold not just Facebook, but Google and Apple and Amazon and all these other companies accountable. So unless the FTC has more resources, I don't think it can do the job it needs to do. But the mandate that Congress gives the FTC and the executive gives the FTC, I see as being the regulator who will ultimately, hopefully, have the most impact.
Um, the other night, you know, one of the things that I think you're right about parents talking to kids is that one of the reasons I think schools really matter here is that, you know, my daughter doesn't really watch a lot of news, and she sat down and watched the Frances Hagan interview with us on 60 Minutes the other night and was very quiet during the whole thing. And there's no question that that woman looking the way that she looks, how articulate and and full of poise she was. I haven't talked to my daughter about it since, but you know, it registered. You know, there's no question. I mean, I think we're entering. You know, my daughter never would have cared about the democracy aspect of this, the civil society part that we've all spent time on. That just wouldn't. It's sort of natural. It's normal. That's the way this stuff works. This is different, right? And I think that, you know, there's going to be a reckoning here. I mean, I don't. I mean, I think something has really fundamentally changed. I mean, what was also interesting to me about even that clip that was on Morning Joe this morning, which I had not seen, I didn't see the whole testimony, was Frances Hagan talked about how under Facebook's very, very narrow terminology about the question of addiction, which they call problematic use, about 5% of people, and I don't know if that was just Instagram and Facebook, were essentially self-identified addicted. Well, if you think about what that, as you pointed out, about what that means in the population in the United States, at the most restrictive possible way, which is admitting that you're addicted as opposed to being addicted, right? You're seeing the size of this problem, right? I mean, we're talking about, you know, tens and tens of millions of people. Susan, who is a great, often it's on come to our presentations. What you've described about Instagram is purely malevolent. Does anyone at Facebook realize that?
I think there are great people who work at Facebook, people who mean well, and who genuinely join the company to change the way the company is working, is operating, people who care about these issues, and people who see the harms of teenagers. The problem is that the company is so metrics driven and so profit driven that when these issues are raised, these issues do not get nearly as much attention as they should in the company. And so when we're talking about the harms to teen girls, for example, Facebook has said now to Congress, and as Frances Hagan has documented, extensive research showing that Instagram is harmful, and Instagram specifically, this is not an industry-wide problem or other social media networks, although I'm sure there are some, but Instagram's own research, so that Instagram specifically, given that research, you know, you would think that the company would have acted on that if they had a set of morals and ethics and accountability and oversight. But they have none of those things. They are purely metrics driven. They're purely profit driven. And so when these issues get escalated to the executives, like Mark Zuckerberg, who wants to maximize profit over people, as Frances Hagan said, maximize profit over safety, there's no incentive to do anything because they continue to make more money.
Yeah. Sobering stuff, my friend, all of this. And how do you feel now that, you know, you've been a warrior, advocate, crusader, right? Frances comes out, we finally know who she is. I mean, it's so recent, right? It's just the last couple of days. I mean, do you feel vindicated? Do you feel sad? I mean, how are you processing all this?
I think, first of all, I mean, I think Frances Hagan deserves tremendous amount of credit for her bravery in coming forward. I think in a way there's vindication because the harms that we've been talking about, we now know that the company has documented those. But I think, as you said, it's also sobering, and it hurts to see that, you know, this company sees the harm that it's doing, and that there are employees at the company who also see the same kind of harm and just can't change the company, can't change the course and the direction we're headed. And it's also, I think, quite upsetting to think about just how these small numbers that Facebook, these small studies that Facebook conducted, if you expand that out to the rest of the country, the rest of the teen population in the United States, or even around the world, just how much of an impact those numbers are representing. We're talking about massive scale mental health issues. And I don't think anyone is saying that these are mental health problems that trace back specifically and only to Facebook and Instagram. They are society-wide problems, but to claim that these platforms have not accelerated or heightened or only exacerbated these problems, I think you'd be quite foolish to think that. So I think it's a range of emotions.
Let me say, I'm going to say two things. One is that having raised teenagers recently, I think it's hard for people that haven't been around teenagers recently to understand how much through social media, through social networks, through friend groups, that teenagers can be elsewhere while being physically present with you.
Mhm.
And I think this is also just my own observation as a dad. And if my daughter ever watches this, she's going to kick my ass for even talking about this. But I think that this issue of being elsewhere while being present is actually a really, and being elsewhere powerfully, right? Being connected powerfully, right? And this is because it's not just the algorithm, the ads, and all this other stuff. It's also the fact that all your friends are also there all the time. And so if you're not there for an hour, you've missed a conversation that is never ending. The conversation begins at 6 in the morning and it ends at 3 in the morning, right, with your friends. And so if you're not there at all times, you are now, betraying your friend group. You're missing something that is not something that's physically proximate to you, right? The friend group that you have could be people scattered all over the world. They could be people scattered all over the United States. It has no bearing on physical proximity. And so one of the things that I'm seeing with my own kids is that their ability to sometimes be present in the moment that they're in is been attenuated. It's been because they are living in this never-ending conversation, this never-ending world of, and it's sort of almost like, if you think back to the original, what's his name, William Gibson, and the whole original, conception of cyberspace, where people would have a hard time re-entering the real world because they were spending so much time in the imaginary cyber world. I think we're there. I think we're there now. And I think this is a whole other issue, right, that is different, that is connected to what we're talking about, but where it becomes very difficult sometimes for my daughter to be present at the thing that that's in front of her at the moment, and to be able to turn off the never-ending conversation, right? And what happens is, and I'm sure you know this because you have friends in London and you are involved with this international institution, is that the more time zones that the conversation extends to, the more it's happening. And so it never stops, it never sleeps. And so you're always missing something. There's not even, so you can't go to sleep from midnight to 6 because the conversation's happening in London, right? And so it's really, I think there's this other piece of this about being present in your own life, the physical life. And I think a lot of this was exacerbated by COVID, right? Where people only had the cyber life and only had the artificial life, and I don't even think artificial is the right word, only had the not proximate life was the thing that kept people sane through COVID, right? And so the kind of things that we're talking about with Instagram have been dramatically accelerated and worsened, and the intensity of it all by COVID, right? COVID created an even deeper kind of addiction and immersion because it's all anybody had, right, for a long period of time. And so let me end with it. That was a statement and a reflection, but let me just end with one last question. So I want like you to talk about is, oh man, I'm now forgetting because I went on with my own thing for too long. Anyway, we could talk all day. We try to go 40 minutes. And so what are your final thoughts? Anything you didn't cover that you want to get out there before we go?
I would say that, to anyone listening, I just hope that whatever kind of small impact you can make in your local community or amongst even your own family that has impact, on the company, it has impact on your own lives, it has impact on your teens' lives. So, do what you can. And these are big, big issues in the country. It can feel burdensome to try and take that all on yourself. But doing what you can in your local area with the people around you, that has impact as well, and that matters. So whoever that is listening out there, I hope that's helpful and that this conversation has been helpful.
And I want to just echo that, is that it's part of what I was trying to get at earlier, and I will acknowledge I've been a little all over the place today in this conversation, because it's both my professional work and my personal life, and I'm trying to reconcile all this in my head. I've spent a lot of time on these issues in recent years, and I think that what you just said to me is the most important thing, which is that we have to stop believing that this is inevitable, that we're powerless, right? We have power, and I think that Frances Haugen has given us now data that we didn't have before, right? That becomes really important in making the case. I mean, places like schools and colleges and sports programs couldn't really get into this place because there wasn't enough data. Oh, I know what I was going to ask you. This is the last thing I wanted to ask you, which is talk about how difficult it is to actually know what's happening with Facebook and Instagram because of the opacity of the way the programs, the platforms are built. And their incredible aggression against what were at one time sanctioned researchers, right? I mean, there's been a whole bunch of things that have happened just in the last few months about this. This was something that was amazing to me working in this space, is how difficult it was. Like Twitter is very easy to understand what's happening. Right. It's very transparent. You can pull people's accounts and see what's going on. You can't really do that with the Facebook. And so can you talk about that a little bit, which is why it's been so hard to actually know any of this, and why what Frances has done is so important, because now we know, right? Now we have data.
Yeah, absolutely. So, right, we have data now, but for years we didn't have any data on from Facebook on the impacts of a wide range of things, on misinformation, on mental health, etc. Laura Edelson is a board member of the Real Facebook Oversight Board and one of the founders of the NYU Ads Observatory. And she was recently kicked off of Facebook, having done independent research on the ads platform. And I'd note for anyone listening that has followed her story that Mozilla, the foundation, independently audited her open source code and found that it was not in fact scraping any data. So there's been a real challenge, I think, for anyone to get any kind of data. I personally have asked Congress at times for the work that we do for questions for the record that Facebook submit post hearings. And I hear from staffers all the time that, oh, we're still waiting for it from these companies. And they take these questions back from the senators and they spend months lawyering up answers to send back. And so we finally have some kind of data. I think it's overwhelming as well, just how much data we've been presented with within the past few weeks. So we should really take some time to try and digest it as people who probably don't study this kind of this in-depth data all the time, and also hear from academics and researchers who will look at this data and have their own opinions. But I think also there needs to be an onus on the company to release raw data, and it's not cherry picked, and it's not, because even now, I mean, they said they released data, but it had their own annotations all over it, their own spin on what we should and shouldn't be looking for and the way we should be interpreting the data. that is no way for a company to act in a transparent manner. I mean, this company is the antithesis of transparency, really. We've seen that way back to 2017. It just continues today. So I'm hoping that the data that Frances Haugen has presented to the public will have that kind of impact. And as you said, and as she said, you know, as she said, whether it be the NIH, and as you said, whether it be schools or university boards, we are finding ways to implement this data in practice and give young people and parents safeguards, because something has to be done.
And I think just to close on my end is that this issue of the opacity of the platform and shutting down, valid independent research became an issue for us in 2018. And in 2018, when we were working with Facebook and Twitter, we brought on an outside social listening company that the very week that we began tracking activity on Facebook, that company, which was at that time the largest social listening company in the world and the most capable of seeing into Facebook, which is why we hired them, that company was kicked off of Facebook's platform and their access to Facebook was reneged the same week that the DCCC started using them in the election cycle. And we were not able to turn the service back on until I think mid-September, through a series of things that happened and fighting that happened between us and the platform. And by that point, it was essentially too late to make it operationally valuable for us and our candidates. It was a big beast and we didn't know how to necessarily use it, and it just was too late, right? And we needed it in the spring to sort of learn how to process the information. And so my own experience, right, as somebody who was working cooperatively with the company, is that when we as a party committee and the Democratic Party started being able to see into Facebook, amazingly at that exact moment, the company doing the work for us was banned from Facebook, even though at the time they were working for companies like GM and, they were at that time the largest social, they did mostly Fortune 100 companies. And I told them at the time, I said, listen, you guys should fire us as a client, right? Like, we're causing you problems in your business. And this is a company called Crimson Hexagon that's been since bought and absorbed into other companies. And the founders of the company based in Boston said, no, we're going to see this through with you. And they stuck with us. And, it took us about 3 months of wangling, but they lost weeks of business where all of their clients were denied access to Facebook. And, whether it was because of us, whether because this was a warning shot that they wanted to fire to this company to not work with, Democrats or people that could do harm to their brand, to me, that was an incredibly alarming moment. And this is the first time I've ever told that story in public, by the way. I mean, I've never told it. And it was to me, another moment when I realized, like, we're up against something here that is not a normal American company, publicly traded company that has sort of a sense of responsibility towards the public interest. I mean, they were playing hardball with us, and they were willing to throw their largest social listening partner in the world under the bus. And it was kind of amazing. And of course, do I know they did it because of us? We're never going to know, right? We're never really going to know. But man, did it feel, that this was something that was done in order to delay our access so that it became inoperable for the 2018 election. And I will always go to my grave believing that they did this because they actually got really worried about how competent we were and how effective we were being, and that they didn't like it. And that, the question of whether or not Facebook really is kind of a Republican company that's keeping sort of has thrown their lot in with conservatives and populists around the world, very hard to not come to that conclusion, right, by looking at what they've done here in the US and other places. I mean, who's their greatest defender today? Ben Shapiro, right, is the guy who's the person rallying for Facebook. I'm not sure I would want him to be the face of the pro-Facebook effort here in the United States. Anyway, Zaim, thank you for your amazing work. You were amazing today. This was a great session. I hope we can continue to collaborate. We'll find a way to work together. I'm really proud of you, man. I'm really
Thank you.
proud of what you've been able to do. It's incredibly important work. And are you 19 or 20? How old are you now?
I'm 19.
Incredible what you've been able to do at your age. And I look
Thank
forward
you.
to seeing what you can do in the future. And let me know if you need help sorting through all the media requests you're going to be getting. Happy to give you a little counsel there. Thanks, everybody, and take care. See you. Be well.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Simon.